This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. My name is Maxine Bell, and I am delighted to introduce you to a new series, A Day in the Life of. These podcast episodes will be released between our longer themed podcast series that you are already used to. We've been interviewing coaches for a while now under the theme A Day in the Life of for our LinkedIn newsletter, and they were so well received we wanted to offer them to a broader audience. The interviews are with real, everyday coaches across the globe from all walks of life who join me to honestly and bravely share their journeys into coaching, how they coach and run their business, what they love and what their challenges are, as well as how they integrate self-care into their practice. It's a real honour to get a sneak peek into their lives, and we hope that listening to their stories will inspire, encourage and assist you, whatever stage of your coaching journey you are on. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our Day in the Life series. And I'm really excited to have with me today Françoise Olivier, who is an ACOA coach. That will be explained as we talk. But welcome, Françoise. It's lovely to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Now, I invited you on because you're doing a particular niche of coaching that I haven't come across before, and actually is something that also feels quite personal for me. So would you like to tell people a bit more about your coaching practice?
Yes, we're connected through my Instagram page, and I coach adult children of alcoholics, and that's what ACOA stands for. I've been doing it for about a year. I've been coaching since 2021 though, so I do coach other people, but I've been specialising in this for a year now. And yeah, it's my story, it's my personal story as well. I grew up with a father who was alcohol dependent and sadly did pass away from that as well. So I'll share a little bit about my story alongside what I do with my clients as well.
Yeah, I'm also an adult child of an alcoholic. My mother is an alcoholic. So I'm with you and I get it. And that's why it was important for me to share, because I think for me, it's only really the last few years that I've really started to come out of denial of how damaging it was as a child living in that environment. So for me, it's something I've been diving into more. And I think it was just really exciting to see somebody out there on Instagram speaking about it openly. It's out there a bit more than it used to be, thanks to different organisations and people like yourself. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what being an adult child of an alcoholic means?
Yeah, sure. There are sort of many traits that we can deliver. There are many traits that we can develop when we are growing up around somebody who is dependent on alcohol. I personally have struggled with quite a few things as an adult: confidence, self-belief, embarrassment and shame whenever I'm doing more public work like this, like coming to a podcast or even just putting myself out there on my Instagram to begin with. I almost kept my Instagram page as a private account for some reason. I thought that I could get away with that because I was too sort of focused on worrying what others might think about me. And that comes from early development years where I was embarrassed about my dad and his behaviour and the way that he looked. He really struggled for many years with his drinking. And I became, very embarrassed and very insular at times. So obviously when we then grow into an adult, that can linger with us and stay with us and affect us in many ways through work or life or relationships. So a lot of the time that when I'm working with my clients, it's about unpicking quite a lot of those traits that we develop. And we've also got some brilliant traits I'd celebrate. One of the reasons I became a coach was because I have a very strong intuition. I'm very tuned in to people. I'm very observant. I can read a room. When I go into a social situation or even just a one-to-one, I can pick up on people's energies and subtle eye movements. And I thought, well, I could make a great coach, because it's not just about asking questions, it's about observing. So I want to make sure that when I am working with other ACOAs, that not only are we acknowledging what's happened in the past, but celebrating all the brilliant, wonderful things and the superpowers that we've developed as well.
Oh gosh, I love that. I've never thought about it like that, but I'm the same. I notice a twitch. Yeah, I see everything. I mean, that comes unfortunately from developing in some ways hypervigilance because you're waiting for the next drama or crash. And I think one of the big traits for me was coming out of my adulthood without knowing I had any right to any needs of my own, because everything is centered often in the household around the alcoholic. You know, you're kind of in a codependent relationship with them. You become their carer. You kind of become an adult yourself before you've even had a chance to be a child. So it's a real loss of identity for myself personally, and part of my journey, and I'm sure for you and your clients, is for me, it feels like a reclamation of the Maxine I could have been and should have been as an adult. But I love this idea of celebrating some of those things. I mean, I'm great in a crisis. I can step back and kind of take charge. That's why I was a good nurse. But
yeah, absolutely. And so many of us say similar things. And I was always described when I was in my sort of teens, 14, 15, I was a wise old head on young shoulders. And that's because I became an adult way before I should have been, really. So yeah, totally what resonates what you said there.
There's a lot of sadness and grief in that, though, isn't there, for us? Because, and this applies to other dysfunctional family things that go on, not just addiction, but it's great to have those traits. But the reason why they're there is a lot of sadness and grief. And I certainly feel like I'm in a process of grieving over the loss of the Maxine I could have been, but also the loss of the parenting that wasn't given and things like that. So how do you, in your coaching, how does it not become therapy, or is it got a bit of therapy in it? Where do you kind of find the balance for that?
So I think that quite a lot of us have to start to reparent ourselves and learn what that means. I mean, firstly, whenever I work with new clients, I am really clear on explaining what coaching is about. And some of them haven't had coaching before. The majority of them actually have come having done a lot of that work with therapists already or counsellors before. And so I want to make sure that, you know, they are clear on the expectations of what it will feel like to work with me. But I also have made sure that I'm equipped. So I've done extra training that is trauma awareness training as well, to understand what goes on in the mind and the body when trauma has occurred or highly stressful situations have occurred, so that I feel more equipped should the conversation spark any memories that feel traumatic. But I will always check in with the client beforehand to establish whether they're going to get what they need from coaching. If there are no goals or outcomes that they want, then obviously it's important that I'm not just taking a client because, you know, it's a new client. I want to make sure they're going to get something from our time together. So while they may talk about things that have happened in their past, I will honour that story and that part of them. And as my role, I want to make sure that we keep the conversation focused on the future and the outcomes that they want and the goals that they're trying to achieve. I'm also connected to other counsellors that I can signpost people onto if I feel that they need a bit of extra support where that's concerned. It's actually surprising how many of the conversations I'm having currently with clients, they don't want to go back there. They talk about things. They still mention, you know, oh, I know it's because X, Y, and Z and as a child happened. But it's not about fixing people. It's not about discovering more about their past. A lot of the people that my page is all about, you know, it's very coaching focused in everything that I talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's similar. I think there's a difference between really acknowledging that these events happened and that you have some effects from that you need to work on and to move your life forward. That's very different than staying very stuck in the past and not feeling able to change your behaviours or your feelings about yourself. I imagine one of the key things that's important for those that come to you is actually having somewhere there reminding you to be kind to yourself, have compassion for yourself.
Absolutely. If we just focus on children of alcoholics in the workplace, for example, we can really want to try and prove our worth and our value by overdoing and overworking and burning out. I definitely spent many years, bit of a martyr in work, last person to leave the office, and maybe even doing parts of other people's jobs that didn't fall under my role and things like that, because I wanted to really prove myself. And a lot of that was linked to not feeling worthy enough, basically, I think. And so part of the reparenting process, I suppose, is looking after a lot of self-care, getting in touch more with our needs. We don't always know what we need. I think you mentioned that earlier. We are very hyper-focused on others. I grew up very focused on my dad and what he needed and whether he was feeling unwell or going out and doing things for him. I lost touch of what I needed. I wasn't also being looked after by the person that should have been looking after me. So that then, as an adult, translates into not really knowing on a daily basis sometimes what we need. So it is about slowing down and having somebody there, supportive, accountable, that you can just start to, I like to call it, authentically reinvent yourself.
I love that. Authentically reinvent yourself. That's a really nice phrase. I think probably adult children of alcoholics have come out with complex PTSD, and complex PTSD is when you have a series of things happening constantly. It can be lots of what they call small T's. There might be the odd big T, but for me anyway, I think every day was like, what's going to happen today? Sitting, waiting as a child for the event to happen, or even the neglect to happen. I remember going to school with a big knot in my hair once when I was younger, and because my mum hadn't brushed my hair for days. I'd brushed it a bit myself, but I had to have it cut out. It was so bad. So I think learning to give what you didn't have and to do that in a real, authentic way, I do think you need help with that, because like you, it's that question of, it sounds silly, but some days I have to stand there for quite a while to say, what do I actually want? That slowing down has been really key for me.
And I think sometimes when you're then like you were just talking about, you just sort of on your own there wondering, what do I need? What do I want? When you're in the lovely space that we know can happen with a coach, and just knowing that that person is coming from a similar background, sometimes the story and the explanation of what happened isn't almost necessary. So a lot of people that have worked with me have just said, it's just so nice to know that you get it.
You get it.
Yeah. And so the explanation doesn't need to almost happen. We can just focus on, let's start here. Who are you here today? Let me meet you where you are, and let's try to work what it is that you'd like going forward and you need. But yeah, I totally understand what you mean. I've gone out before. I share a bit on my Instagram page. I've gone out for runs in the completely wrong, like I love to go running, completely wrong gear for the weather that I know is about to happen. But I haven't stopped to think, right, what would I need today to make sure that I'm going to be okay? Like, I didn't go out with an umbrella the other day, got caught in the rain. Just little things like that when I look at my partner, for example, he's always thinking, right, what are we going to need today? I need this, you need that. I'm going to need a coat.
You'll probably remember what he needs and not what you need.
Yeah, exactly. I'll always remember something he needs, but not necessarily for myself. Yeah.
And I guess this is why it's developmental trauma, because what's happened in the process of growing up is that bits of your brain that maybe should have been wired up, and you should have been taught about caring for yourself and feeling equal to other people in the room. So we're kind of rewiring, aren't we? All those bits. And it does take time and practice.
Yeah.
And that's slowing down.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start to really explore things properly. I've always had access to counselling. My mum tried to get me to do counselling when I was little, and I hated it. Counsellor didn't say much and I had to speak, and I've always been way more of a listener than a speaker. So the fact that the counsellor was just sort of sitting there asking just these questions and then expecting me to do a lot of the harder work, I found really difficult. So I had the odd bit of counselling growing up, but really the work that I started doing on myself started in my 40s. The pandemic happened, and that gave me a chance to really sit and reflect on, why am I still single? Why am I unhappy? I was very depressed at the beginning of 2020, and I was fed up with it. I just knew something had to change. So that's when I started to do the work, quite late on in life, really, I think.
I've been the same, took 3 burnouts before I started.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew my childhood wasn't kind of settled, but I was blaming myself for being just defective rather than seeing that this was an effect of a cause. Françoise, 2 things. One is that I agree with you. It's so, for me, relieving to walk into a room and have a coach or a counsellor or a group of people that have the same story of having an alcoholic parent, because hashing your story again is exhausting, but it takes a weight off your shoulders immediately as soon as you've walked into a room and you know the other person gets it. So I think that's where your coaching is really important. But also, I just wanted to add a caveat about what an alcoholic is and what an alcoholic looks like, because it's different it's not always obvious. And my mum is one of the ones that maybe is less obvious as an alcoholic. I just wondered if you wanted to add anything about that, what you would sort of term an alcoholic or what other terms they're using these days.
Yeah, definitely. It is important. I grew up using that word about my dad. And then it wasn't until I did some of the work on myself in 2020 that I discovered the charity NACOA. So it's the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. But I then started to delve into, I've done their volunteer training, and I'm aware now that there is another term, alcohol use disorder. And that is preferred by some to explain that it's more about the alcohol use rather than the person being weak or doesn't have willpower. And so some prefer to use alcohol use disorder. You can have two people grow up in the same household. One person can have a few drinks and it doesn't affect them. And then the other person, it can really send them loopy. So at the end of the day, alcohol is a legal drug. We have to remember that. And I think I've started to look at my dad's addiction differently. Before 2020, I don't think I really considered his story and why he was drinking. I don't think I ever really asked myself why. What is he trying to escape from? But since I've learned a little bit more about addiction, I've done the training with NACOA and just working generally in this space with people, I'm starting to understand that it's not about the drinking, it's about the why are they drinking? What are they trying to soothe? And that's probably the one regret maybe that I've got. I don't like having regrets, but I think I probably would have liked to have maybe asked more questions with my dad.
Yeah, everybody has a reason why they turn to addiction. My view on addiction has changed in that I think everyone has an addiction of some sort, whether that is social media, whether that's coffee shops, it doesn't matter, but we all do things to avoid certain feelings at certain times.
And I think one of the questions you posed when we first met was, do you think all coach training providers should offer trauma awareness in their training? And it was a question I never actually asked myself. So I reflected on it and I'm 100% yes to that question now. Obviously, I chose to do that because of my history and the fact that I was going into a niche where I knew that it was highly likely trauma existed. But actually, when we stop to think about, like you've just said, we've all got traumas. There's always a story. And find me another human being that hasn't had some form of trauma or is in currently a highly stressed job, for example, that creates some form of trauma on the body. So you could replace the word trauma almost with chronic stress, and people are still going out there getting coaching and need coaching. There's this idea that, maybe coaches shouldn't handle certain things, but I think there's no harm in us having that knowledge so that we know and we are prepared should that come into the coaching space.
I totally and utterly agree with you, but I also believe it goes beyond that even. I think because coaching is about people, obviously, and what walks in the room you don't know. And especially these days, we all have been through a pandemic, which was shocking and traumatic. And, lots going on in the world at the moment that kind of will trigger the trauma that's already in you. So I think being trauma informed these days in the workplace in general, or just anybody really, is a good thing to learn about. But I also want to just again point out that it's not a trauma. It's not a trauma when you just don't get what you want.
Yeah. What I'm loving about since entering into this space is the honesty that I feel like the honest conversations that we can have. And, we just met earlier before this started and we were just very open. This might show up for me in this way. I can get a bit anxious. I can get a bit nervous. I don't like putting my head above the parapet. I don't like being on show. Again, I know exactly where that's rooted in. I was quite an anxious and nervous child, and I still have tendencies to be that way now. But the fact that I could just own it and say it out loud and feel supported, how I might feel in this sort of scenario. And I just, that's what I'm really loving is the community that I've built on my Instagram page and that we can all be open and honest about our stories.
Yeah, honesty is so important because a lot of addiction, a lot of things that happen in families, secrets are often kept. And we're encouraged to keep secrets. My mum would say, don't tell this and don't say that. And I can remember being asked to keep so many secrets and it's not healthy. So for me, truth and honesty is really important. And I've had a very difficult year this year. And so being able to be honest about it with my colleagues and feeling supported has really helped me more than I think they even know. So I hope they're listening. I'm very grateful because I now feel in a stronger place again, because I wasn't judged and there was understanding and patience on their part as well. So I agree, having community, having the right people, whether that's at work and outside work, is just incredible.
And owning our story. I just think back to my 20s and 30s where I was like that person that I described of overworking. And I wouldn't have once thought about going into my manager and saying, I come from this background and I've got these things that, I didn't know. I wasn't aware at that point. But that's what happened when I kind of in 2020, when I did the work and I found an ACOA and I found this community of people and I found that we can all show up certain ways in the world and there are others like me. It was almost like I've said before, it's like this light coming down on me and going, oh, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. There are reasons why I am like the way I am. And that's when I decided to start owning it a little bit more and being proud actually of my story.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a fight back on the shame that you walk around with a lot as well, isn't it? Of we don't choose our family, we're born into it. All we can choose is how we take it forward, how we manage our own lives, how we learn to care for ourselves, how we learn to come out of denial and start really, like you say, owning your story. So yeah, it's a powerful thing. I'm quite passionate at the moment about the story sharing because the world is so divisive. And I think that my experience is that when we do share, when I've been on workshops with other people, personal growth workshops and things, that sharing just breaks down barriers so quickly because somebody might walk in the room, big, bulky tattoos, look a bit scary. And the next thing you know, they're in tears telling you about the sexual abuse they had when they were a child. And suddenly you get it and you're like, wow, and the compassion is there and you're connecting because of the shared stories that you have. It breaks down barriers of race, gender, and all sorts of things. And that's part of the reason why you're here as well.
I know. Me sharing my story, starting this page, the Instagram page has all got me here today. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you for that. Let's focus a bit more on your coaching practice and what you do. What's your typical week do? Because I know you do some other work as well. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so as well as my coaching practice, I also work for a major coach training provider called the Coaching Academy in the UK. And I help people decide if they want to be coaches. So I have these lovely conversations with people just like us, usually highly empathetic, wanting to do good in the world and help change people's lives. Yeah, we explore the idea together. So that's something that I also do alongside my ACOA coaching. And I also am the confidence coach for another academy called the Parental Academy. So I do a bit of work with them. I do workshops for them as well. And like I say, I coach other people from other walks of life through another platform that I'm on called More Happy as well. So lots of fingers in many pies.
Some new coaches out there, often one of the biggest issues they have is how do they get clients? How do they find work? And as we've learned from this series, many coaches, do other work to support themselves as they build their coaching practice. How did that happen? How did you get so many fingers and so many pies? Did you network or did you have some other things happen?
There's lots of different ways in which I've found clients or clients have found me. I think that a lot of it is around, so firstly, the academy, the other academy that I work for, that's through a connection of mine. And when you're out there on LinkedIn and talking about your coaching and maybe talking about the results that you get, people see that. And I got that through a friend. A lot of it is word of mouth. I've also had clients that have come back time and time again. They didn't necessarily have an ongoing relationship with me throughout a whole year, but they've come back and, after a bit of a break. But it wasn't really until I really niched down with the ACOA coaching that my coaching practice sort of transformed really. And they say that, if you're out there speaking to everyone, then you're speaking to no one really. And I think once you actually find your people, I think that's an easier way to find clients. I use LinkedIn a lot as well. I try to not just keep my coaching to the Instagram page. I also use my LinkedIn connections. So yeah, I think it's not just one way really. You've just got to go out there and have really interesting conversations with people and make sure they're clear on what you're doing and how you enjoy it. And that shines through sometimes when you're talking about it and people say, oh yeah, I want a bit of that. Or I know somebody who needs that. There's not sort of one way to find a client, I think.
I think you're right. Everyone has said that the networking, the kind of being bold enough to talk to people, tell them what you're doing, reach out to people for advice or whatever it is. Having those conversations seems to be the key to opening many doors, basically. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Of course, doing this as well is running your own business as well. So what challenges do you face? What kind of things are sort of challenging you?
I think the biggest challenge that I have to push through my own, again, it sort of links back a little bit to playing big, being seen, going out there and putting yourself out there, is probably the sort of marketing side of things. So I launched the ACOA coach page on Instagram a year ago. And like I said to you at the start, I wanted to keep that private. I didn't want anyone finding me. I don't know how I thought I'd make it work, but that was my thought. And someone said to me, you've got to go public, otherwise it won't work. And anyway, I did, but I had to push through the fear, embarrassment of having to do maybe videos or speak on video or be open to opportunities like this to speak on podcasts. So I think that has been this year, there's been a challenge, but it's a challenge that I'll never let it stop me. I always want to push through that uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes I can struggle to know how to scale my business. I think that's another challenge. I would like to reach more people. I would like to help more children of alcoholics. And I think that I want to try and find a way to maybe go into businesses and do some workshops. I haven't quite got the idea all perfect yet, but I like the idea of maybe, educating businesses about how we can maybe show up in the workplace and some of the things to look out for and spread the word, basically, and try and reach as many children of alcoholics as possible.
That's a great idea, going into businesses. And there are bound to be leaders of businesses that are adult children of alcoholics as well themselves. We've just done a series on neurodiversity in the workplace, talking about inclusive workplaces. And what I've actually found is that some of the things that would work for somebody who's neurodiverse probably would work for me too. It's quite interesting. I think there's a fine line between the results of CPTSD sometimes and neurodiversity. It's quite interesting. Yeah, if there's any businesses out there who are curious to have a conversation with you about it, maybe they'll reach out after this podcast because, again, that's sort of linking in with the trauma-informed information as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and if a workshop of mine can somehow help their employees to be less burnt out or spot the ways they're not helping themselves by, approaching their work life, then hopefully it would lead to less sick days, less burnout, less anxiousness, all sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea. And so it's quite apparent to me that you love what you're doing. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what it is you love? I don't know if you've got any case studies you want to share, but what do you love about the coaching?
Gosh, I love so much about it. It gives me so much energy. When I decided to be a coach, I used to work in a completely different world. I used to be in fashion. And before I decided to do coaching, I was really unhappy in my other work. But if you'd asked me then, is there anything else you could do? I just wouldn't have been able to see it. I just could not, a bit like what we said, we just didn't know what we needed or wanted. But after I managed to I took voluntary redundancy and it gave me that shift to, right, what is it that I could possibly do? And I sat down and looked at my strengths. It's the first time I've ever done anything like that. Looked at my strengths, looked at my adult child traits. I'm great, like I said, at reading a room. I'm observant. I'm more of a listener than a talker. I've always sat there and listened to my dad growing up, So I looked at that, looked at my values, and I decided that coaching could be the thing for me. And I think when you make a really values-led, strengths-led decision like that, it really pays off. And I just love being in a room like this with somebody else and helping them get to where they want to go. And like I say, it just gives me a lot of energy. And I've never felt anything like it in previous roles. So I know it's the right thing for me.
That's precious. I mean, so many coaches that I meet come to it through life experiences, and that ends up almost becoming their niche. And so I think for those coaches sometimes that are worrying about what is their niche, I think it starts to become organic because, coaching is about your own personal development as well. And you go to the places that you know and you understand. And actually, they're often places of pain originally, but then they turn into your purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the work that I've done myself in coaching and I've most recently had an NLP coach, and it's really been transformative, letting go of some of the beliefs that I actually realised were not actually mine in the first place. They were probably my dad's beliefs. And I had somehow taken them on as my own as a little child. And going back to that question about the challenges that we face as coaches, or if I face, it's a daily work that I have to push through that uncomfortable feeling sometimes to go out there and show up and play bigger and be bolder. But I'm loving it.
Yeah, as I say, once you push through the fear, then the excitement is there, isn't it? It's quite a quick jump in some ways. Now, how do you care for yourself as a coach, Françoise?
One of the things that I have to do on a daily basis is get out into the sunshine and get out into nature. I really prioritise either a walk in the morning or a run or some form of moving my body. And I feel like if I can get out quite early, I love getting out in the mornings and doing that. So that's really important. I make sure that I try and fit that in. The other thing that I do is after coaching sessions is to do some self-reflection and just write, basically, just see what comes. Maybe a couple of questions that I ask myself. What went well and what could I have done a bit better if I had that time again? I think that's really important. And I obviously have my own coaching and supervision as well, which I think is very important. And yeah, I prioritize things like sleep, important stuff like getting to bed at the same time every night. My partner's always laughing at me that I'm like, it hits 9 o'clock and I want to get into bed. I want to relax and I want to do some things before I want to get to sleep. And I make sure that I have a good night's sleep, stuff like that. It sounds so simple, but it's very important.
Yeah, it is very important. It's the old adage of, put your own oxygen mask on first, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've become a lot better at that, I think, as I've got older and done some of the work on myself, is making sure that I am thinking about, and actually I think it's really important being a coach to make sure that you're showing up in the best place possible when you're in a session with a client. I always make sure I've got time before and after a session to make sure that I'm letting go of whatever happened with the kids before, first thing in the morning, to make sure I'm in the best sort of mindset possible. So yeah, little things, but important.
Yeah, very important. Yeah, thank you. So we're coming to near the end of our discussion, Françoise. So just before we end, let's just say now, what is the name of your Instagram page and can you be contacted on LinkedIn as well?
Yep. So Instagram is _ACOA, ACOA _coach. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Françoise Olivier, and my website as well, Françoise Olivier Coaching.
Lovely, thank you. We'll put all that in the show notes, but what I'll also do is put some links to some other organisations that support adult children of alcoholics as well. There's lots of different things out there that are really helpful, so I'll put that in the show notes. So before you go, have you got any final pearls of wisdom you'd like to share with coaches out there?
I think what's become apparent, I love these conversations. They're a reminder to myself, but the thing that's come out, I think, is the owning our stories. And I think that, whether that be people that are choosing to decide to become coaches or people who have been coaching for a while and wondering, should they be sharing more of their stories, things like that. I think that's the thing that's really transformed things for me, was being able to confidently just step into my story, not be embarrassed anymore about the things that have happened. And yeah, I think that's just own your story.
Yeah, and that's what's allowed you to create a space for all the people that you're seeing and following on Instagram, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That wouldn't have happened without you owning your story.
Exactly. And, they may not all come and want to have, me as their coach, but they certainly send me messages and say, thank you so much. It's like, I could have written this. And I think that whether it be just knowing there are others out there with similar backgrounds helps break down, like we've said, the shame. And I think it's important.
Well, I'm sure that anyone listening to this that is an adult child of an alcoholic or as a coach or not as a coach will find this talk inspiring to see that, you demonstrate that you can move through the events that happen to you and come out the other side actually finding something that you love and having a passion for life again.
I hope so. Yeah, that would be brilliant. And if anyone wants to get in touch and share that with me, I would love to hear from people.
Yeah, thank you. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and sharing what you do. It's been great. Thank you, Françoise.
Same to you. Thank you. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, signature programs, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.